Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome to another edition of Inside Arsenal. I hope you are well, wherever you're enjoying this around the world, whether you've been watching on YouTube or listening on your podcast platforms. It's Friday. It's always a nice feeling, and it's always a little bit more extra special when it is North London Derby weekend. So we're going to spend today's show talking mainly about that because, let's face it, there's nothing bigger going on this weekend than that encounter at the Emirates, and I am going to do it in the very capable partnership with this man here, who I'm sure you all know doesn't need too much introduction. It is, of course, Tom Canton from the Gooner Talk. Tom, how are you doing, mate? All good?
Yeah, very good. Tired, but good. Yeah.
Tired, yeah. I will tell everyone we're recording this on Thursday, although it is going out on Friday. And so Tom is still struggling a little bit from his late night excursions at the Emirates on Wednesday night with that Champions League. What time did you get in? About 1:30?
Yeah, 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, long one.
Yeah, I'm not missing that at the moment, Tom. I have to say, I am much more enjoying home games, being able to watch them, and then, not hanging around in mixed zones for hours upon end. I'm not
Yeah.
missing it. I reckon I will soon start missing it, but right now,
Mhm.
I'm not. I have to say, yeah, that was a fun night, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, if there's a way to come back to the Champions League, that's certainly the way to do it. 4 goals, and I did. I think you can break down a lot of the good things that we did, but I think there has to be kind of the undertone that PSV made it very easy for us doing that evening. Really, really did. Peter Bosz said before the game, he was like, "We're going to come and attack Arsenal. We're going to show courage." And I'm like, I don't know if it was courage or more naivety on their part, to be honest, because they were very open and we took advantage of it.
Yeah, they were very open. They're very much Bot's side, sort of looking at the way they played on Wednesday night. But yeah, I mean, you can only beat what's in front of you. And they did cause Arsenal a few problems, I thought, on the breakaway. I think they're going to certainly be a much tougher proposition in the home game over in Holland. But yeah, it was clinical, wasn't it, from Arsenal? They were so good going forward. I remember I was writing something in the build up to that game for the website, and I said it felt like Arsenal were going to give someone a bit of a hammering fairly soon. And yeah, they were so clinical, weren't they? The quality of the goals, all of them. It was just a real top quality display of finishing.
Yeah, it really, really was. And I think it was important that we scored early to kind of settle the Champions League nerves, because that was always the narrative that was running throughout the game, was that this was the return to the competition. And we were going up against a side in PSV that obviously had beaten us last year in the away leg in the Europa League, and really were a tough side in the first leg as well. I say leg, it's obviously in the group stage, but
Yeah,
the 1-0 home win was kind of a really gritty, hard-fought 1-0 win. It wasn't a free-flowing, dominant display, and they had chances, but they've lost, obviously, the likes of Simmons and Gakpo and Ibrahim Sangara as well. So they are a different side. There are still plenty of players still there that were there the last time. But, when you've got Sergino Dest playing an orthodox left-back role against a fit and firing Bukayo Saka, that leads to the first opportunity. And Odegaard I described him as near to a perfect performance as I think I've ever seen. He was outstandingly good. So, yeah, exciting times to watch.
he was so good. There's just a few moments in that where when a player's playing well, where you almost laugh at how good they are. He does something and you just laugh to yourself at how brilliant it was. He was absolutely sensational, Martin Odegaard. I was talking, actually. I was doing my show that went out on Thursday morning, and I was saying I can't really think of many better players in the world right now in his position than Martin Odegaard. In the quality of his finishing now, how clinical he is, the way he strikes a football. He's not just about playmaking and creating chances, the goals he scores as well. I mean, you sort of, obviously De Bruyne is like the benchmark at the moment in that position. He's injured. But, other than KDB, I just can't really think of anyone else that really I'd want in that position in a team right now. And he's still so young, Odegaard. It's so exciting what he could be.
Yeah, I think the other obviously form player, ironically, feeds quite nicely into the weekend, which is James Maddison at Spurs. He's the other attacking midfielder that's having a really fantastic start to the season. But yeah, you look beyond that. I suppose Jude Bellingham at Real Madrid is playing a more offensive role as well, and he's certainly being kind of their force, if you like. And Odegaard is certainly being a force for us. I still can't quite believe they let him leave because it just staggers me that 32 million quid is all that it took to get this guy through the door in this. It's only 2 years ago, 2021, since we brought him in. And it just seems like that must be one of the bargains of Premier League history.
Yeah, when you look at the prices that people are paying for people now, and like you said, at the time when Real were beginning to sort of change as well and go for a younger team. It just seemed like the perfect moment for them to finally bring him in. But obviously they've gone down another route, and for Arsenal it's worked out perfectly. He's captain, playmaker, goal scorer. I mean, top scorer last year. He's just such a good player, and he's going to get better. And he's going to sign this new contract very, very soon, and that is really, really exciting for Arsenal. Before we get into the Spurs game, you mentioned it right there. I just wanted to sort of flag this quickly. Let me just bring this up on screen for those watching on YouTube. You were down in the mix zone after the game, and you spoke to Luke de Jong. It was quite interesting. He said to you that they're already basically competing for second spot after one game.
Yeah.
Surprised at that comment, because obviously it was a brilliant win for Arsenal, but it's very different when you go away. And like last season, PSV destroyed Arsenal really in the home game. It was 2-0, wasn't it? But it could have been much, much more than that. A couple of goals disallowed are far, far better. So are you surprised that it almost seems to be waving the white flag after one game?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like I asked the specific question about are you going for second spot. I asked him, do you think you approached the game in the right way, being so open and offensive? And he spoke about how that they always wanted to come and attack and play their game, but he spoke about how Arsenal always created a spare man. There was always space when PSV tried to press them, and they played through that press really well. And then he added on that PSV are looking at basically competing for second spot with the other two sides, Sevilla and Lens, who I think that they should be the second team in the group, because Sevilla are not very good. They're not the side that won the Europa League only months ago. They're fourth bottom in La Liga right now. Lens, since losing Apenda and Fofana, are now bottom of Liga as well. So sitting top of the Eredivisie after 4 wins, 4 games, 13 goals scored, you'd look at them and say, yeah, they're good enough to qualify through this group with Arsenal, especially considering they beat Arsenal last season. But I think it maybe shows how much progression has happened since we last played them, and the perception of even the opponents of Arsenal have added Rice, have added Raya into the side as well, have added this a level of quality and the improvements of individual players like Odegaard, who we've already mentioned, but also the unit that is the defence and that's come together. When we played at the start of last season against PSV, Ben White was only really starting out playing in that right-back role, whereas now he is a fully accomplished right-back in this Arsenal team. And again, I thought at the weekend against Everton, he was an understated player in that performance. I thought he was excellent. And so I think that although I'm surprised that he, after just one game, has kind of said, well, Arsenal are going to get top spot, there's obviously reason behind that almost consolation at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it was a perfect start, wasn't it? I think I went into the game thinking, is the occasion going to get a little bit too much of it? Are they going to lose their heads a little bit and, sort of play into PSV's hands? But they didn't at all. It was a really professional performance from them. They didn't let the occasion get the better of them. Martin Odegaard spoke about it afterwards. He said they were really pumped and they wanted to prove a point. But sometimes that can kind of work against you, can't it? But it didn't on the night. I thought Arsenal were off it. Like you said, the early goal was brilliant. It settled any nerves. And I thought it was so fitting that Saka got that goal. The first goal back after 6 years for a player who's basically kind of been the central force of this upturn since Mikel arrived. He sort of, carried the team on his shoulders as a teenager and got the team to this point. And for him to score the first goal, I thought was really, really just a really fitting moment. And from then on, it was men against boys on the most part. But look, I want to sort of switch attentions now to Sunday and what's just a huge North London derby. I mean, they're all. It seems like every single season now we keep saying, "Oh, this is a massive game. This is a massive game," because of one narrative or the other. But this one, obviously, both teams have started very, very well. They're going into it level on points. Tottenham ahead of Arsenal on goal difference. They've scored more goals. Arsenal conceded less, but it's I mean, I think in a way Wednesday night was perfect for Arsenal going into this one, because it's been a little bit. I don't know how I describe it. Kind of stop-start in terms of Arsenal's start to the season. They've played well. They've picked up results, but they haven't blown anyone away. They needed, I felt, a result like Wednesday night to really kickstart the season, and they got it just at the perfect time. Do you think that's going to really send them into Sunday in real buoyant mood?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of talk about the fact that, Spurs have got this week off and Arsenal are going to play a midweek game. But actually, Spurs' last game is... Yes, it's a moment where they scored 2 late goals against Sheffield United, and that's a boost. But there's something to be said, I think, about the question marks that go with that game, that they had to really dig in to find a way around Sheffield United, whereas Arsenal were dominant against Everton, deserved more than just the 1 goal that they scored, and then have obviously got this game against PSV where they've then showcased all of their potential of what they can do to a side if you open up. And Spurs are probably the most open team that we'll come up against in the games we've played at the start of the season. You know, Man United came to Arsenal with a strategy to counter-attack, and it worked to some degree, but ultimately ended in failure. And I think that maybe Ange Postecoglou might look at that and go, well, if you are going to beat Spurs, if you are going to beat Arsenal, then you probably do need to try and attack them as much as you can to get and take opportunities that you create. But by doing that, you are opening yourself up to being at your most vulnerable against Arsenal. So if Arsenal could play any of the quote-unquote big six, I think a home game against Spurs is probably the most favourable right now, because they are the most open of all of those teams that do try to attack, that will be threatening, and we will have to cope with that, but should have plenty of opportunities for Arsenal to get in behind and, you know, find Trossard, find Jesus, get Odegaard darting in and around outside the box, get Saka driving to the byline again. And even though without Martinelli, I think Trossard showed, you know, what he brings, the variety, the unpredictability in his game. And I think all of those four are going to be a great threat that Spurs, I'm not sure whether or not they have an answer to still.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame Martinelli's out. I mean, obviously, Mikel says he didn't rule him out completely, but I think we all can kind of read into that. I can't see any way that Martinelli comes back from a hamstring injury where he doesn't train on Tuesday, he doesn't play on Wednesday, that suddenly he's playing in the North London derby on Sunday for a player who relies on pace and acceleration. I mean, he's out. Obviously, no Thomas Partey either. But you mentioned Trossard then. I thought, you know, he's come in for Martinelli and done so well in the games against Everton and last night. Wednesday night. I thought he was sensational in that game. Odegaard was great. Jesus was fantastic, but Trossard was really, really good. His goal was brilliant. He's sort of played the run and then the pick out for Jesus for the third goal as well was top quality. And you know, when you lose a player like Martinelli, it can be a real big blow. But when you've got the strength in depth and you've got players like Trossard who can come in, it's such a big boost. It's a bit of a different Arsenal setup. You know, I thought Trossard actually did still hug the touchline a lot yesterday, more so than I've seen him doing quite well. He loves to drift inside, but he still stretched the game a lot yesterday. I don't know if that was a deliberate thing that Mikel told him to do, but I think we'll see more of that against Spurs, because Arsenal want to stretch the pitch, make it as wide as possible to create that space for the likes of Martin Odegaard, who in the game at Spurs last season obviously absolutely revelled in the space that there was in the middle. I heard Son talking, or I saw a quote from Son in the build-up to this one saying that he doesn't think Arsenal would want to play Spurs at this point because of the form that Spurs are in. And I'm like you, I'm not too sure I agree with that. I think Spurs at home, Arsenal, they're not going to be fearing this new look Tottenham under Postecoglou. They'll give them respect, and I think they probably deserve respect because they've started the season very, very well. But you know, the form Arsenal in, the fact that we're looking at probably only Martinelli and Partey as the two big absentees, you know, Arsenal going into it in good shape.
I think, is there anything better than an overconfident Tottenham side to play? No. You know, I'm glad they're coming in with maybe an air of arrogance about the start of their season. They're coming in confident, thinking they can get a result, which is what you want, because it means that they'll try and attack us, which feeds into what Arsenal want from opposition sides. The most annoying thing about Spurs right now is how much I quite like their manager.
I know, same here. It's horrible.
It's not nice liking the guy, but you can't beat around the bush. I think he's a great human being, to be honest, on the sounds of things. Like, he talks really well, he speaks really well. He's very down to earth, very grounded, and he wants to play football, which is always commendable of a coach, you know, rather than the reductive Mourinhos and Contes that they've had in recent years. And you know, those types of managers have succeeded against Arsenal so many times because Arsenal tend to struggle against sometimes that type of performance. So I also like Ange because I think his style might suit a North London derby more so for Arsenal, as we've been discussing. I think that Spurs come into the game off the back of obviously some really good form and 4 wins out of 4 in the last 4 games. But I still think there's something to be said about the opposition that they faced. Yes, they beat Man United, but this Man United team aren't very good, and arguably in that game deserved more with the handball call from the penalty that wasn't given. And they had a spell in that game where they probably should have taken opportunities in it as well. A Burnley side that still managed to score twice, so I think I've really underperformed what people's expectations were of them. Bournemouth, of course, as well, away from home, you know, arguably could have got something from that, even though Spurs got a couple of goals. And then who's the other game that I'm missing? I'm missing Sheffield United, of course, which we've already mentioned, who, you know, could have come away with something quite easy if it wasn't for a big turnaround. So I look at Arsenal. I think they go into the game with a better amount of momentum now, especially after that Champions League result and the buoyancy that will give them. And I think that Arteta's got plenty to be confident about going into this one.
I kind of look at how Arsenal started the season, and it's been slow, hasn't it? I think when you compare it to last season, we flew out the blocks last season. We're tearing teams apart, playing this brilliant, exhilarating football. Got 5 wins out of 5. This season it's been different, but they're only 2 points worse off. And actually, if Arsenal win at the weekend, they've had a better start after 6 games than they did last season at this point. And they haven't hit top form yet. But in a way, you look at that, and Gary Neville's spoken about it. I don't often agree with Gary Neville, I have to say, but he's got a point. I think when you're sort of starting things slowly, but you're picking up points and you look pretty solid and you're dominating games, it's a very that's something to look at in a positive light, isn't it? You're not hit top form yet, and yet you're picking up results. I mean, Arsenal could quite easily be sitting with five wins out of 5. They should be sitting with 5 wins out of 5 if it wasn't for what happened at the end of the Fulham game. And I just think Wednesday night is kind of the lift off that they really, really needed. I wanted to ask you now for your sort of looking at what Mikel might do. You made a couple of changes against PSV. Obviously, Havertz came back in. Jesus went up top instead of Nketiah, and there was another change as well, which I can't think of off the top of my head.
Raya for Ramsdale.
Yes.
Sorry. No, Raya came for Ramsdale the other weekend, but there was Jesus for Nketiah and Havertz was the only 2 changes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're sort of looking at that 11. What do you think he's going to go with this Sunday? What would your predicted 11 be?
It's actually quite difficult to know these days, and that's a good problem for Arsenal have. I don't think we're going to see too much different from what we saw last night, to be honest. The one change we might see is Vieira coming back in for Havertz. I think that what you talked about earlier about Trossard hugging the touchline a lot more against PSV, maybe compared to Everton, was actually because Havertz tends to occupy that half space on the left. He doesn't really come out to the wide left-hand side. Whereas if you watch the game against Everton back, Vieira is constantly to the touchline. He really comes out wide in that left 8 position. And I think that pushes Trossard inside. So if he wants to use the wide area more, it would make sense to go with Vieira in for Havertz with Trossard out, and those 2 combined. I thought they combined quite well on the day. I know that Vieira Martinelli was the partnership I was looking forward to seeing, and I tweeted about that rather with a great amount of Schadenfreude in retrospect, because sadly Martinelli got injured. But I think that what Vieira has shown at the start of the season is maybe, ironically, with Havertz being the guy he's replacing, the time that you do need to sometimes give to players when they arrive at Arsenal, because it was always going to be difficult for him coming from a different league, which Porto dominate most of the time besides Sporting and Benfica. And it's a much more physical league. And I think that's one of the big attributes of Vieira that he struggled with at the start, was the physicality difference. He'd always go down under challenges maybe too softly, and the referees weren't giving fouls like they will do in Portugal or in Europe. And I think he has adapted to that. I think there is a slight improvement in his kind of physique over the last year as well, especially over the summer. I think he's been improving on that. In fact, I know he's been improving on that. And I think that what we've come to expect from that left-hand side with Zinchenko moving into midfield is there's a lot of emphasis on the left 8 and the left winger to do a lot of the work. Whereas on the right-hand side, you've got Saka, Ødegaard and White pushing up kind of closer to the touchline, far more so than Zinchenko does. So I like the technicality of both of those 2, and I think they will cause Spurs a lot of issues with either one of Porro or Emerson, who will start, because Perisic is out, so he won't be playing at that right wing back or right back role, and Porro and Emerson are both very offensive minded. So there's hoping that we'll find spaces down that left hand side.
Yeah, I mean, this is the 11 that I've gone for. I think Vieira comes back in for Havertz. So that's
mine's the same.
Personal opinion on it, and I think Raya starts in goal. Do you think Raya keeps it now? Obviously, I thought Ramsdale might come back in last night. I had Ramsdale my predicted 11. It's like I'm still at that point though. Now I'm thinking, was Everton a bit of a warm up for Raya just to play in the Champions League game? Then Ramsdale comes back for Spurs. I keep sort of mulling it over in my head, but I think it's becoming pretty clear that this might well be the.
Yeah, I felt like, and I said it on my morning show on Thursday, that I kept on going over it in my mind. I felt like him starting Raya in this game. I think the word mistake is too strong, especially when your goalkeeper keeps a clean sheet, does really well. But I just felt like starting Raya here instead of Ramsdale created even more of a kind of a furore around the goalkeeper position. If Ramsdale comes in here, all of the narrative is, okay, Raya's going to start in the league. Ramsdale's going to be the cup games for now until they want to swap. But by playing Raya in both, there's now this whole, is Ramsdale being treated unfairly? He got them into the Champions League. Did he deserve to play in that Champions League game after helping them get there? Did you have any question marks about Raya starting, even though he is, for most people, probably the better goalkeeper of the two?
In a way, but I think we've got to sort of take our feelings towards Ramsdale out of it, really. I was watching CBS reaction, and I thought Henry was really good at it on it at the end of the day. He's just like, look, because I think Schmeichel would come on, and Schmeichel would have had a bit of a go on how Arteta's treating Ramsdale, and then Henry was like, look, Mikel Arteta's the coach. he's building a team that he wants to win the league. You know, he brought in Ramsdale to help Arsenal get top four, and now he's obviously looking at Raya and thinking, you're the goalkeeper who might win me the league. And so, as much as we all love Aaron Ramsdale, and I do, and he's made such a big impact and been so important in this sort of rebuild under Arteta, I think at the end of the day, if Raya's a better goalkeeper, which I tend to think he is, then I think you've got to kind of take personal feelings towards Ramsdale out of it in a way, and just think this is football at the end of the day. It's cutthroat, it's ruthless, and that's what Mikel's being. So, and I do wonder as well, it's creating a lot of fury at the moment, but I wonder if Ramsdale wasn't English, if it would be creating the same amount. I think the fact that he's obviously really pushing Jordan Pickford to be England number one, he just played against Scotland. You know, I think we as in the media are sort of creating the story and making it a lot more like Mikel saying, why aren't I getting questions on Gabriel Jesus not starting with Eddie Nketiah starting and stuff like that? I think the fact that Ramsdale feels to be very, very close to being England number one. It's a really big story over here, and it's making it more of a story. So yeah, but I do think Raya starts in goal. So on Sunday, I'd be surprised if he doesn't. But then this is Mikel Arteta, so who knows? But I spoke to your colleague earlier, my former colleague Alistair Gold from Football.London, and I asked him for his predicted 11 for the game on Sunday, and this is what he's gone for. So he's gone for Porro at right back, see Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie, and then Basuma as a 6, Sarr, Maddison, Son, Kulusevski, and he thinks Richarlison has probably done enough from what he did against Sheffield United to earn the starting spot. And I think Sheffield United, Son started at the 9, didn't he? And Solomon played out wide. Yeah. So this is the 11 that he's gone for. When you look at that starting 11, what would you be kind of worried about? Where are the sort of battles or the key battle that you're looking at that could be vital to, either the game being won or lost?
Well, I think obviously James Maddison is there, the key player in that team. Heung-min Son, obviously on the left-hand side. I'll tell you what, when I'm happy Ali's picked Richarlison. And I know there's been a lot of focus around the player's mental health recently as well. But I do think speaking objectively on a footballing side, I think Spurs are less threatening with him at centre forward compared to, say, Son and Solomon. I've been impressed with Solomon since he's arrived at Spurs. So I hope that's the team they go with, because also if their plan is in some ways with Richarlison scoring that header, that they might get some balls into the box that Richarlison can attack. Raya starting is very good at collecting those crosses. So hopefully that is in some ways, and Gabriel and Saliba have been very good as well in dealing with them. So if that is in some way a plan, I hope that's true. But for me, Udogie at left back, against Bukayo Saka, that's going to be a key one. Saka's, he will be in such fine thought ahead of the game because scoring in the Champions League, what a boost that will bring to him. There's been a few question marks, about not only his form, but his fitness after those suggestions of a potential injury. I think they've probably been slightly overhyped from what I've heard. And I think that when it comes down to a player like Saka, who is so good at taking players on, and especially maybe players that underestimate him in the sense of they've not had too much time in the Premier League, as Udogie hasn't, because he's come in this season. It's going to be his first time coming up against Saka, so there's a lack of experience going up against someone like him. That could be an exciting battle. On the other side, of course, you've got Trossard up against, as I mentioned earlier, Emerson and or Porro in the case that Ali's predicted Porro to start. And I think with Porro being so offensive-minded, you've got Trossard and Vieira, if he starts to get in behind and use that space. I think Jesus can peel out to the left-hand side as well, and Trossard's quite comfortable moving centrally. So that fluidity and unpredictability about Arsenal's attack with all front three, I think is going to create some real problems for them.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think looking at Jesus at the moment, I thought that the showing against Manchester United when he came off the bench, obviously he didn't get too much time against Everton, but last night as well, the sort of 60 minutes he got under his belt, it's just beginning to look like the Gabriel Jesus who, as Mikel likes to say, causes utter chaos. And I think he could cause that Tottenham back line a lot of problems. I kind of look at the two here, James Maddison and Declan Rice. Obviously, I don't think they're going to be that pally and that smiley on Sunday when they come up against each other. But I think that's going to be such an intriguing battle because Maddison's been fantastic for Spurs. I said at the time when they signed him, it just looked like that was going to be a really, really smart piece of business, and it obviously has proved to be. He's really making them tick. And Arsenal can't afford to let Maddison have loads of time on the ball to get his head up. And I think Declan Rice, that battle there of Declan Rice trying to close the space down on Maddison, I'm sure he's not going to be too far away from him a lot of times during that game. I think it's going to be really, really crucial to how, you know, Arsenal and Spurs get on. And I agree with you as well. I look at Saka and that battle down that side. And if Saka can come out on top of that one, then, you know, I think it's going to be a really good day for Arsenal. I'm not going to do predictions because I don't like doing predictions. I'm very, very superstitious, so I don't do them. But I do think Arsenal have got, you know, as good as Tottenham have been this season, and as much as I think Postecoglou's a really smart appointment for them, the sort of appointment that they've needed for a long, long time, I still think the way Arsenal are playing, the players that they've got, I think they've got a lot in their tank that can hurt Spurs. And, you know, if Arsenal are smart and don't do anything stupid and let themselves get caught on the counter attack, I think, I think hopefully, fingers crossed, will be another good North London derby. Right, Tom, look, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me. I know how tired you are, so I'm going to let you go. And also, a wasp has just flown into this room, which I've got my eye on over there. I can just imagine causing me some real problems in a minute on camera. So I want to get this wrapped up before it attacks me. But thank you very much for your time, mate. And everyone, I'm sure you already follow the Gooner Talk, but if you don't, I'll put the link below to go and follow Tom's channel. It's a fantastic channel. And yeah, he's very much worth a watch, and his stuff over at Football.London as well. Tom, have a great couple of days, mate. Enjoy Sunday, and yeah, come on the Arsenal.
Right.